Electric lemons. We've all heard about lemons, right, when talking about cars. Well, what if you buy an electric vehicle and it turns out to be a lemon? Last week, Journal de Montréal, they did a whole series. Boy, did it paint a bad picture about electric vehicles, right? And they told poor story. They'd had people, story after story. But, like poor Joe Schmo who bought a VinFast, bought an e-tron, and just terrible stories, Audi e-tron, about how it all worked out. So, say what you want about electric cars. I'm a big believer. I love my electric car. It's the best thing, the best car I've ever owned. But this is still a new industry. And with new technologies, sometimes come troubles. Let's go to Georgini from the Automobile Protection Association. George, welcome back to the program. Great to talk to you.
Good morning.
So, what are we seeing right now? What are we seeing right now with electric vehicles? Are we seeing, proportion-wise, more lemons, more issues with EVs than, the gas cars we've been used to for a century?
Probably we are, but I think you need to define it a little differently. What we're seeing the challenges with is really new tech generally. So the pace of changes has really picked up in terms of car technology, and whether it be a gas or an electric vehicle, the teething problems when a new model comes in are worse than they were before. Even brands like Toyota and Honda have had, some models that didn't have good introductions. In the past, that wasn't the case. They were untouchable. Honda, certainly going back to about 2017, 18, 19, their in-dash electronics went from being reasonable to very buggy. Toyota just introduced some trucks that had first-year launch problems that, they never used to have with their pickups before. So it's a sign of the times. And, of course, all electric vehicles are new tech because the car makers, are just entering that field. And so they've had issues. And some brands worse than others. Volkswagen is particularly bad. You mentioned the Audi brand. That's a Volkswagen product.
Mm-hmm.
And the car makers also, for reasons that we don't fully understand, aren't supplying parts when a vehicle is off the road in its first or second year. So we have cases where people are making payments, let's say a $1,000 or $1,200 a month payment on a luxury car or a pickup truck that's electric, and they're driving a Hyundai from discount. That doesn't make any sense. The car maker is not providing them any compensation for the loss of use of their vehicle.
So, George, what I'm piecing together here from what you just said, from the stories from Journal over the last week on EVs, the core issue here seems to be software. Okay, and you bring up Volkswagen. We had a guest in this studio once, and we were just talking during a break. And I was like, "Oh, what do you drive?" And they were like, "Oh, I have an ID4." And I asked them, "Well, how do you like your car?" And they're deadpan, George. They said, "I wish someone would steal it." And then I said, "Well, why?" And it all had to do with the software, okay? Like the touch screen and trying to navigate the software. Do you feel, George, the problem here is you've got traditional car manufacturers. They never had to make software of this caliber in their whole in their life. And now they're being forced into being software manufacturers. You think that's the issue?
It's a good part of it. I don't think it's all of it, but yes, for sure. The in-dash electronics, Tesla came out with the first giant screen in 2012, and then by 2017 they had put that onto the Model 3, which was like a entry-level luxury car, and people were wowed by the concept of it, but it basically forced everybody else to sort of go in a direction that maybe they thought was 20 years away, and to try and collapse that into 5 years. And we have seen issues because of that rush to get more things into the dash. And arguably, the controls that we have today are actually less convenient. Touchscreen buttons, sub-menus are not as good as conventional buttons. And in the long run, it'll be cheaper for the car maker. And so we're not probably going to go back to what we had before, but some versions of what we had before are coming back where, the heating and ventilation controls are separate. So at least if the screen goes buggy, you still have heat you can still drive your car. That's kind of important to have. What we think the end point is going to be is that the pace of change will eventually slow down. We probably have one more generation of battery chemistry, a big leap to make to get the cost down on the batteries and the use of the metals that are hard to mine to move to a different chemistry. That would be ideal. And then maybe things will calm down a bit. But for the next few years, I think we're going to be seeing more of what we're seeing now, where it does pay to do your research before you shop to avoid a vehicle that might have a higher chance of having problems.
Okay, on doing your research, I think that's a really important point. We're with George Eny from the Automobile Protection Association. So, George, on the research front, and some of these stories that I've seen from last week, again, from that Journal series, they speak to a poor owner of a VinFast. Okay, that's that Vietnamese electric vehicle startup. They made a big splash in North America. I remember, and this is not too long ago, this is like 2 years ago, when they launched their vehicles in North America, every single car reviewer absolutely panned the vehicle, its software. Some reviews saying it was the worst vehicle they've ever driven. It wasn't like, oh, that was just one person. Like it was across the board, really bad reviews. So do you ever look at some people and say, hey, you should have done research. You should have been paying attention to the reviews. Do you put any blame on the buyer at times of bad vehicles?
I don't know if blame is the right thing, but it's an important purchase, and most of the information, it's very rare that you'll get a situation like the VinFast one where new vehicle reviewers who are getting a vehicle that was prepared and is being loaned out to the press. So usually it's more than likely that at least they've gone over it lightly, and often there's even an agreement where journalists, if a car breaks down, don't talk about it too much in their review.
Yeah.
But if a situation like the VinFast was unique, and after those reviews, I don't think you should really have touched it. It was a very risky purchase. Some people said, well, maybe when they're buying something all new, they figure they're going to lease because then they're not stuck with it at the end of 4 years. But that's really not a smart strategy for avoiding a lemon, because whether it's leased or financed, it's not going to be drivable. It doesn't matter if it's a lease or not. You're not really covering yourself. With a lease, what you're covering yourself against is a loss of value upon resale, because, of course, a used VinFast has no value. And most used electric vehicles have poor resale value because people are legitimately concerned about the long-term reliability. Apart from Tesla, we don't really have enough long-term experience with most EVs. And the ones that we do know about, vehicles like the Nissan Leaf, for example, have been very troublesome as they get older, as they get past the end of their battery warranties. They're best avoided. So for most models, it's hard to find out. The conventional mantra is that electric cars need no service or very little, and therefore won't cost you much to keep going. The reality is they're more expensive to keep on the road because of depreciation, and because of the problems that it's more expensive to repair them when they do fail. So long term, your energy cost is much lower. But short term, if you were going to buy to sell within 3 years or 4 years, your upfront loss on depreciation and possibly on non-warranty service could be higher.
New cars have a problem. Seemingly, it boils down to software and some of the new tech they're trying to throw into vehicles. It's creating some headaches. George Eny is sticking around with us, continuing our discussion from the Automobile Protection Association. George, and I've got a couple of callers that are waiting actually to speak to you, but let me just throw one thing at you. We've seen a lot of startups, right? I mentioned VinFast before. There's Rivian out there. Poor people that bought a Fisker, the Fisker Ocean, that they already went belly up Fisker, right? And you have people that bought a car, spent $80,000, the company no longer exists. What do you say to someone who may be considering buying a vehicle from a relatively new company? What would you tell them?
I would wait until the vehicle has amassed a record. So you're talking 2 or 3 years before you know how that company will do. And in that way, you're more likely to avoid being sort of a test driver for the company in its first couple of years in Canada. Often even in vehicles that are proven in other markets because our climate is tougher or because of cold weather or other reasons. there'll be teething problems. That the early Teslas that came here tended to rust much more than the ones that are out before, but that was a vehicle that was developed mainly in the southwestern U.S. I'd like to make one point before we go further.
Yeah.
The end point is absolutely electrification. It brings many, many benefits. This is really what we could call bumps on the road during the transition. And I'd also say most people who buy a new car are very happy with their purchase. What we're talking about is the edge cases. It's either models that are not fully figured out, car makers that are having trouble with reliability on their vehicles. So some Hyundai and Kia vehicles, for example, those are gas vehicles, big engine problems. Those companies stepped up. Other companies, like give you the example of Nissan, they had big transmission problems on their gas vehicles and they haven't stepped up. So you can also, depending on how the car maker reacts, people are willing to go have quite a bit of inconvenience if they feel their back is covered. So there are it's not all dark. There are also some good things that are happening right now. If you want sort of a vehicle that is the most flexible, and this is what the market is looking for, where you have the benefit of both legacy gasoline power and electrification. It's a hybrid, and there are excellent hybrids on the market. Some that you can even plug in, and those vehicles are totally suitable as a household's primary vehicle. And you'll save minimum about 30 to 40% on fuel consumption, and with a plug-in, it could be a lot more than that.
Let me bring in some of our callers into the conversation. Ryan is in Chateauguay. Ryan, you've got a Polestar 2. You've got an issue?
I had the Polestar 2. I now switched to the Kona Electric. I got lucky to pick up a 2021 with a full warranty, even the battery, everything, unlimited mileage. But that Polestar was a bit of a nightmare for repairs. Tires are super expensive. The windshield was almost $2,000 because not only do they have to replace the windshield, they have to recalibrate all the sensors in the car because of all the advanced electronics that are in the vehicle. It was a fun car to drive. It went from zero to holy cow pretty quickly, but it's the cost of ownership. We think, no oil changes, no brakes because of regeneration. But then there are other things. There are a ton of electronics in these things that must be recalibrated after even a small fender bender can turn into a catastrophe.
Great points, Ryan. Thanks very much. Let me throw that at you, George. Maybe some of the things we're not thinking about, and I'll raise my hand. On a road trip last year, got dinged by a rock, and my car's got a super duper glass roof, and it was $1,700 for the replacement of the windshield because of that. What are your thoughts on what Ryan just shared with us? Some of the things that may surprise you when it comes to maintenance costs on EVs.
Well, it's not just EVs. So any vehicle with an advanced automatic braking system, which is a technology that we're very, very much in favor of. Most of those vehicles have sensors that are mounted more or less where your rear view mirror is, the central one, in front of the mirror. And so if you're changing the windshield, they need to be aligned and set up on the new windshield. And that requires an extra step, which does increase the cost of windshield replacement, requires a special tool to do it. And so many of these features, a bumper used to be a bumper, what was called a skin, which is the plastic part in the front, you could get for about $500. A car dealer could easily have one repainted and installed on a vehicle for well under $1,000. And today there are sensors in those bumpers, so that repair has become much more expensive and can require recalibration. Not exclusive to electric vehicles, that's gas vehicles as well. And the caller is absolutely right. Electric vehicles are powerful and heavy compared to an equivalent gas vehicle, and they use up their tires between 20 and 30% faster. Even when they're special EV tires that are designed to take the higher loads, they still wear out more quickly. And that's something that the reviewers don't really tell you because they don't keep a vehicle long enough to have that experience.
Okay.
By the way, the so-called no-brake jobs.
Yeah.
Again, it's an overstatement because what happens is the brakes are so little used that they corrode. And so that you don't need a brake job for several years until all four have to be replaced, and it's a $2,000 job because everything is rusted.
So true. Like I've heard, like, hey, you need to actually turn off your regenerative braking and use your brakes once in a while because you don't have to use brake on certain models, right? You almost never touch them, right? So it requires some foresight on that front.
Yep, and ideally maintenance once or twice a year to clean off and lubricate the calipers and other components as necessary. Your repair shops should be suggesting this to you, but I'll tell you two things. One, we're surprised dealers often don't. We don't quite understand why. I mean, it seems to be short-sighted to want the bigger job at the end of 3 years. And the second one is clients are sometimes reluctant to pay for it. It's an extra 45 minutes on their invoice, and sometimes people are concerned that they're being oversold a maintenance item because that's common. Often at the service writers are often commissioned for selling you oil treatments or other extras, but brake service is actually something that's prudent to get if you drive a hybrid or a fully electric vehicle because the brakes may not be working all that much.
Can I just ask you quickly, George, are there any manufacturers who are getting this and like they're trying to maybe remove some technology to make repairs cheaper? Like, all the sensors you had, is there anyone who actually gets it and is focused on making repairs cheaper?
The aftermarket. So people who don't work for the manufacturer, but where vehicles are made in large numbers and have a particular weakness, the aftermarket will sometimes come out with a solution. We have an example. We're involved as experts in a lawsuit against Volkswagen for a turbocharger repair. So there's a lever on the outside of the turbocharger that can corrode, and when it seizes, your turbocharger stops working. Volkswagen sells you the complete assembly for $5,500 installed.
And what is the third party? And what's the third party doing?
They replace what might be a 25 or 50 cent part in the lever. It's a hinge or a pin with a stainless steel one, and they just change that part.
Wow.
And that's but even that repair is still about $2,000, but that's 60-70% cheaper than VW. And we still don't understand why on the assembly line. This is an old problem. The car maker won't make that pin out of proper stainless steel. It's one example among many. Where it's the opposite of what you asked me, is what car makers do to make repairs more difficult.
Costly.
And make it harder require you to change complete assemblies as opposed to just the defective component. But sometimes the aftermarket will come out with those solutions.
Let me just try and squeeze in one more caller here at the end here. Stephanie's in Pointe Claire. Stephanie, you got to be quick. What's your question?
A new Tesla, 2024, alignment was off. The car kept veering to the left. Had it repaired, quote unquote, 3 times. Still hasn't been fixed. Only has 12,000 kilometers on it. Tires are okay. Everything else was okay.
What should Stephanie do, George?
Well, who's doing the work?
Tesla, because it's still under warranty. And they said, no, it's fine. But then I had them drive it with me. And lo and behold, it was veering. The computer was correcting for it, but and I paid for it, even though it's under warranty. So, yeah, it's not working. And there was no impact. They said there was impact. There never was, other than potholes.
How much was the wheel alignment?
380.
That's another thing. So that Tesla and electric car service in general is more expensive. I think there's plenty of shops that would be thrilled to maybe making $380 for a wheel alignment that in your case would have been a simple one since they didn't find anything wrong. I try and get a second opinion from a shop that specializes ideally in electric vehicles and has their own alignment equipment. See if they can help you find out what's happening. Is there a component that's dragging or doing something to pull the vehicle to one side?
They did find that it was veering. However, they said they repaired it, but they didn't after 3 times. As soon as I come out of the shop, it still veers.
Right. So you need to get a second opinion from a different shop.
Stephanie, good luck with that, okay? Thanks for the call. Get that second opinion. George, thanks so much for your generosity on your time. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
Georgini right there from the Automobile Protection Association.
I'm Dylan Playfair.
And I'm Tyler Smith.
We're putting loneliness in the penalty box by talking to some of our favorite athletes about the importance of friendship.
This is Bromance.
Bromance is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, proudly Canadian-owned and operated. Charm has been part of your love stories and bromances for over 50 years. And you can find Bromance on the iHeartRadio network or wherever you get your podcasts.